Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Buffalo One podcast for the evening. We are looking at our preview for Week 8. Buffalo Bills, New England Patriots, Monday Night Football. A lot of excitement with Monday Night Football coming back into the Buffalo area. And this week we have a special guest with Mark Schofield coming in to talk to us and going to go through and look at how the Pats have been doing so far this year, where we see the Bills, and what we can look for in this Week 8 matchup. As always, we're brought to you by Cover1.net, a great website to be able to come in, take a look at everything going on, exciting draft previews, which sadly the Bills are looking at earlier than usual, awesome film breakdowns as usual by Eric Turner, and just fantastic content for everyone. So as soon as you have a chance, head on over there to Cover1.net, check out everything we have going on, and hopefully jump in the fun. We have a great premium Slack channel, a lot of good discussion going back and forth. But for this week, I will turn things over and introduce our special guest. Mark, tell the people where they can find your work and what you have going on.
Greg, thanks so much for having me on. Huge fans of what you guys are doing over at Cover One. Where people can find me, InsideThePylon.com is probably the place I'm most known for. Pro Football Weekly, The Score, Matt Waldman's Rookie Scouting Portfolio, Big Blue View over at SB Nation, and I'm the host of the Locked On Patriots podcast. So those are the places people can catch me.
Excellent. We appreciate you giving us a couple minutes tonight. A couple things we want to go through to be able to look at, obviously the matchup, but why don't we start out just kind of taking a look through the first 7 weeks? How do you feel like you've seen where the Patriots are through 7 weeks versus what your initial expectations were?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to think about, because when you look at the Patriots right now, obviously, 5-2 coming off, a victory over the Chicago Bears. This is probably where you might have thought the Patriots would have been before the season started. Maybe, they lose that game to Kansas City. We all sort of expected that Jacksonville game is going to be tough down in week 2 because the weather, the conditions, the rematch from the AFC Championship game. So it's about where we thought the team might be record-wise, but it's not how we would have expected them to get there, especially with the start that Kansas City had. It looked like that Sunday night game was going to be one that it was going to be tough for them to win, but they were able to pull that one out. Losing to Detroit, I'm not sure a lot of people expected that one. And I think when you look at this team on both sides of the ball, and I know we're going to get into it, offensively, they've been hurt by some injuries. The Isaiah Wynn injury sort of in the preseason hurt them because they were expecting to have him, at least as their 6th offensive lineman. So at least going into this week, you'd have him at right tackle, perhaps, instead of, Adrian Waddle in there instead of Marcus Cannon, who's battling with a concussion. So there's that. Obviously, Sony Michel missing preseason, and then now with another knee injury, hopefully he's back. Maybe this week. I'm not so sure they'd rush him back, but probably going to miss a week or two again with a knee injury he suffered against Chicago. So there's been some injuries they've been working with. The Edelman suspension that has kind of hamstrung them on the offensive side of the ball for the first 4 weeks. And the defensively, this was a bright spot for this team, at least in the preseason. You looked at the addition of a guy like Juwan Bentley, who was a 5th-round draft pick out of Purdue. Not somebody that got people really excited. He was kind of an afterthought down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, but it looked like, multiple year starter at Purdue. Seemed like he might be able to inject some athleticism into this defense, a defense that definitely needed athleticism at the second level. That hasn't materialized yet. He was lost to injury. This defense has been giving up yardage in bunches. They gave up obviously 40 points 2 weeks ago to Kansas City, 31 last week to, the Chicago Bears. Now they were given some short fields and things like that, but still, this defense hasn't materialized quite the way we thought. So it's been, I think, the start record-wise we expected, but it hasn't really been the way we would have wanted to see it coming together on the field.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that obviously the one area that's been polar opposites with the Bills and the Patriots has been the injury front. The Bills have had some one-off things. Obviously, you lose Shady 2 games in last week. You lose Josh Allen the week before that. Micah Hyde missed a week. So we've had some key people miss a game here or there. I don't know that the Bills have any prominent players on injured reserve. They may technically not have anyone on injured reserve. So going through, that's been a huge difference in obviously showing the depth and the kind of franchise that that the Patriots have together, the depth they have to be able to keep churning out successful competitive weeks, losing some pretty prominent players through that stage. And now, obviously we'll get into it when we go into the offense, but looking at, your Jonas Gray of 2018 with Kenyon Barner and looking at what the next plug-in guy is going to be. And obviously when you have the staff and then the leader in Brady, that I think a lot of people simply have the expectation that, oh, I'm sure it'll work out. And that's just such an amazing luxury for Patriots fans to have that level of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, it does make things a little bit easier because 12 is able to mask a lot of flaws with this team, whether it's flaws in protection at times, which do pop up from, time to time. They've really focused in the past couple of weeks on the quick passing game. We saw that when Cannon went down against Kansas City on that Sunday night game. They were really worried about D Ford coming off that edge, matched up against the Adrian Waddle. You saw a real shift there to that quick passing game, a lot of design stuff to James White out of the backfield, a lot of quick throws to him. And obviously last week facing Khalil Mack, you'd expect more of the same. They did a lot more of that, even though surprisingly Vic Fangio decided that it made sense in some strange way to drop Khalil Mack into coverage 18 times, which is something he had never done. The highest number of coverage snaps he's ever seen in his career. They did it with Leonard Floyd too. He saw 16 coverage snaps. It's not how you expect to use those guys. So what do the Patriots do? They isolate those guys in some mismatch situations. Touchdown to James White, one of his two was again Leonard Floyd matched up against coverage. And so, that's what the Patriots want to do. They want to sort of identify mismatches, try to exploit them in the passing game, and then run the ball when they need to. Their running game has been quietly effective, particularly over the past couple of weeks, even when James White was in instead of Sony Michel, which has kind of helped take some of the pressure off of Brady. There are still some things that they need to clean up offensively, but I think they're starting to get where they want to be on the offensive side of the ball.
No, yeah. I mean, obviously you're seeing some things round into form, just going 4 straight weeks, 38, 38, 43, and 38. You obviously have some things rolling. From the Bills side, obviously I think where many fans felt like they would be, there's obviously a sentiment that from a roster on paper standpoint, a lot of people wouldn't have been shocked with 0-7. I think there was some frustration because obviously you get a surprise upset against Minnesota. You get a really strong competitive game against Tennessee where they pull out a last-second victory. You go into Houston kind of feeling like you have things rolling pretty well. They had the game under control. We're right in it. Have the injury to Allen, and then you see obviously the comical element of what Nathan Peterman is today as an NFL quarterback. So I think that because it let fans get their hopes up a little bit, they allowed themselves to think, hey, maybe we're going to get some of those sneaky, ugly, muddied wins that we got last year to sneak into the playoffs. And I think it allowed people to kind of get ahead of themselves. Realistically, I think this brings us back to where we truly expected to be, a rough season, eating that monster dead cap number for a fresh start next year, 10 draft picks, $90 million in cap space. And I think it's, again, probably similar to your comments on the Patriots, probably record-wise about where we thought we'd be. But, I don't know that anybody thought it was going to be wins against 2 playoff teams and then blowouts in the rest.
Right. Yeah. And that's been kind of interesting, sort of watching Buffalo from afar, watching Allen and watching how this team is taking shape because, I was extremely impressed with Allen sort of in that, game against Minnesota, what he was asked to do in that offense during that game, some of the sort of developmental strides you saw from him where he was willing to check the ball down. They had some design shot plays for him. He didn't force throws into coverage. He was much more careful with the football and with his decisions. And so it's things like that make me think, look, as somebody that was not high on him coming out, these are the types of things you want to see from him. And that's a good sign, I think, for his development.
No, I appreciate that because I think a lot of us are in the same boat. There weren't a whole lot of people on the Josh Allen train pre-draft, and then since then we've taken the approach that any fan base would, that all right, maybe this isn't the name that we wanted, maybe it's not the Josh that we wanted, right, but he's with us now. So what can we do to look for? What are the signs of development? What are the incremental steps we should be looking for? And although it has been rocky, there have been some of those. There have been more glimpses of self-awareness, footwork, technique, things that we've looked for to say, okay, I think we might have something here, along with plenty of nasty rookie mistakes and some of the flaws that we all knew were coming in. But that's really where our focus has been, is trying to find what can we expect and what can we look for.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to watch, and I think provided he's avoided a serious injury, and I think he has,
Seems that
looking
way.
forward to seeing him coming back. So
Yeah, I think conservatively, many of us are assuming that there's not a lot of reason to rush him back now. We have 2 more games after this, then the bye week. Even in the most conservative approaches, they said 4 to 6 weeks would be for a mild or a mid-grade UCL strain. So even if it was mild, I doubt we're going to see them rush him back. I think they wanted a window to let him watch from the sideline anyways. That was thrown out the window with the disaster under Peterman and the mismanagement of debating between AJ McCarron and Peterman and not having another guy in the room. So I think that now they've kind of stumbled into that window that they wanted anyways, of having him sit and learn and watch. And we'll kind of, most of us are expecting him back week 12 after the bye.
yeah.
But why don't we go ahead and jump in here, look at this week's matchup. Obviously, we'll start with the more exciting side of the ball where both of the team's strengths lie. Looking at the Patriots offense coming against the Bills defense, short of last week when going into last week, the Bills were 3rd in the NFL in DVOA, had started out really ugly. 6 quarters into the year, we had let up 75 points, then went on a 3.5 game stretch with, during that 3.5 games, the #1 defense in the NFL. Really strong, tons of pressure, a lot of timely turnovers, then kind of fell back to earth last week with a really poor performance against the Colts. Coming in from the Patriots side, what are you looking for? And I know you touched on some things earlier with the isolation and matchups. What are some things that you think the Patriots are going to look to do to be able to identify the right matchups with the Bills defense?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of trying to get those matchups, it will start with the decision whether Rob Gronkowski can go or not on Monday night, because so much of what they try to do still in the passing game derives on getting him some favorable matchups, getting him either outside isolated against defensive backs, or getting him over the middle isolated against linebackers, whether it's off of play action or doing some other things to sort of get him into some one-on-one situations. If he can go, I'd look for that. If not, we're going to see basically what I think we saw against Chicago, where they're going to rely on the running backs, particularly James White, to get him into some matchup situations, and they'll do it whether it's using motion and pre-snap movement, which they love to do, or what they have also done with the emergence and growth and continued reliance on Josh Gordon, is sort of used Gordon as a pseudo Gronk at times. And what I mean by that is you see their offense against Chicago, there were times where they would go play action with Brady under center, and they like to throw either those quick seam routes or those sort of like quick post or crossing routes behind those linebackers, behind those second level defenders. They love to do it with Gronk. They were doing it a couple of times with Gordon, with Gronk out on Sunday against the Bears. And so that's kind of been their sort of pseudo Gronk replacement, because their other tight end, Jacob Hollister, he's basically been MIA. He's been battling some injuries and stuff. They were really excited about him, sort of their backup move tight end type. Dwayne Allen isn't really a receiving threat. He's more of a blocking tight end. So that's the first thing I'm looking for. And then I do think that this is going to be primarily, if Gronk is there or not, a quick passing game, getting the ball out of Brady's hands quickly, because we know that sometimes pressure can impact him. The Buffalo Bills are one of those teams that has gotten some ways to get interior pressure on him. Kyle Williams, for example, has given the Patriots fits over the past couple of seasons. I think it was a game 2 years ago, maybe last year, one of the 2 games. I think it was more 2 years ago, where he was really sort of eating Joe Thuney's lunch in one game, was really getting some pressure on Brady. And so, they're going to focus on the quick passing game. They'll take some deep shots to Gordon from time to time, but it's going to be what we usually see from them. It's going to be a lot of Edelman. It's going to be a lot of, Hogan on those quick designed hitch routes, Edelman on those option routes, and trying to get the ball out of Brady's hands as quickly as they can.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's something that we're looking to from a development standpoint with the young linebackers, that for that mid-season stretch there, that 3.5 games I touched on, the communication and mesh between the linebackers and the safeties was flawless. They were handing things off back and forth, letting the linebackers use their youth and athleticism. Obviously, having people like Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds, 2 guys both running sub 4.5, you're able to do a lot of things. However, in the second game of the season, you saw Phillip Rivers absolutely destroy them in isolation matchups, where they were able to spread things out, use pre-snap motion, get them on Austin Eckler, Melvin Gordon, and all of a sudden you had a lot of plays where they simply, they're great athletes for a 6'5", 250-pound linebacker in Edmonds. He's not someone who's going to keep up with an Austin Eckler, and James White is the super version of that same player. So I'm looking to this to see, okay, from a individual development standpoint with Tremaine Edmonds and from a schematic standpoint with Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott, are they going to put Tremaine in a better position? Are they going to have more protection and support when obviously, with, people like Michelle and obviously Burkhead already, and the players that are gone from the backfield, James White is such an important cog in that offense that are they going to have a better plan together to be able to support him, keep coverage there? Are you going to see some spies? I actually would be disappointed if we see some of what you mentioned with Chicago. I don't want to see Jerry Hughes dropping back. I don't want to see Trent Murphy dropping back. I don't mind, the 2, 3, 4 times when you have the zone blitz that the Bills are very good about only sending 4 every play, but you don't know which 4 are going to come. A lot of A gap posturing where they're setting up, kind of, positioning, faking as though they're going to go, rarely coming, but you don't know. And then every once in a while you drop a Trent Murphy or a Eddie Yarborough, Shaq Lawson back just to throw a little different look in there. But for the most part, we need Jerry Hughes there in Brady's peripheral, trying to shake things up. That 8-man front that you had touched on with, obviously led by someone like Kyle Williams. We've actually seen some nice contributions from people like a waiver pickup in Jordan Phillips out of Miami. Mm-hmm. Some nice depth in the draft with Harrison Phillips. A much maligned signing with Star Latuile, but actually some nice flash plays the last couple of weeks, bringing Shaq Lawson into defensive tackle. Lorenzo Alexander actually plays a fair amount of third and long defensive tackle, pass rush defensive tackle, and they've used that 8-man rotation all the way through to keep guys fresh. And many of the games, no defensive lineman's gone over 60% of the snaps, but everyone over 30%. And I think, as you touched on, with Wynn being lost and some of the movement they've had there with Waddle, or looking at maybe some of the weaker links like Athuni, is there something that you think that defensive line can maybe give some trouble to the Pats offense?
I think so. And what's going to be something that I'm going to be watching is, like you said, Greg, the 4-man pressure schemes, but you don't know which 4 are coming. Yeah. And, when you're facing a defensive front like that, communication is critical. But this is going to be a difficult environment for those offensive linemen, for Brady to communicate. I mean, we're expecting, I'm expecting a raucous environment there Monday night, particularly if this game gets to be close into the second half, into the fourth quarter. So communication is going to be critical for those guys up front. And if, Buffalo is able to do a good job, like you say, mugging the A gaps, showing pre-snap pressure, then dropping 3, but still bringing 4, and you just don't know where they're coming from when you haven't communicated it, that's when you see some of those quick pressures. And if you look at that Chicago game, for example, there were a couple of instances, 2 or 3 different plays where they got some quick A gap pressure because of communication issues up front. And that led to an incompletion in one instance, a near interception in another, and an actual interception that allowed Chicago to get back into that game when New England was kind of looking to ice that game in the fourth quarter. And so those are the things that Buffalo is going to need to do. If they're able to sort of get those sort of miscommunication issues up front, they'll be able to generate some pressure. That being said, you've got, guys like, especially in the interior, Mason, Andrews, Thuney, these guys have been playing together for the past couple of years now. Yeah. They're pretty good on the inside. So it's tougher to get at that in quick, immediate pressure, but you can still do it. And if Buffalo does, it's going to go a long way to keep, not just potentially keeping this game close, but pulling off that kind of upset.
Yeah, I won't go quite that far, but the level to keep it competitive, I think that a lot of people anticipate, and we'll get to it with maybe a prediction here at the end, but I think a lot of people expect maybe something similar to that late game last year, where maybe it's competitive in the first half, maybe they have some pressure, a timely turnover. Obviously you're not expecting an interception from someone like Brady, but I think that there is potential for a strip sack fumble, some things like that. if they get a couple bounces to go their way, get a couple matchups that are going well, maybe somebody, if LaShawn McCoy plays, we'll get to that here in a moment. Maybe you get a big play from him. I think there's some hope that they can get some things going. But why don't we flip over to the maybe less exciting matchup, but what could probably be the difference of whether this is competitive or whether it gets out of hand in the lesser of each team's units, the Bills offense, which is to this point historically poor, and the Patriots defense, which has been okay, had some signs of hope here, but obviously the last few games giving up 24, 40, and 31, although in a win in each game, still giving up a pretty healthy amount of points. What are some things that you think the Patriots are going to be trying to do to get right here in this game against obviously a strong matchup for any NFL defense? And what are some things that you think they'll have to be careful of with the few spots that the Bills have some legitimate NFL talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way to sort of address this part is Bill Belichick enters every single game plan, every single defensive game plan with an idea and an eye towards, stopping what you do best. And Bills fans are probably acutely aware of it. The game plan against, the K-Gun offense back in that Super Bowl where he said, look, guys, I know that we pride ourselves, Giants, on stopping the run, but we're going to let Thurman Thomas rush for 100 yards because it's going to slow down their offense. We're going to take away what they actually might do better, which is throw the ball all over the place. And so, their focus is probably going to be stopping the run game. Because if LaShawn McCoy can go, you want to take that away. You don't want to let them, get those 10, 12, 14 play type drives where they're churning out yards and, keeping that clock moving. So they're going to probably try to stop the run. What's interesting about that, Greg, is that, last week aside, they gave up 134 yards rushing, but I think 77 of that, or maybe even more than that, was Mitchell Trubisky on some scrambles. I mean, he was their leading rusher. They were really worried about Trubisky in those scramble drill situations, and he was able to make some plays. And there was actually a clip, NFL Films caught Belichick yelling at the guys on the sideline in a defensive huddle, basically saying, he's not going to beat us throwing, but he can beat us scrambling. Like, that's what we got to worry about. And so before that, though, against Miami, against Indianapolis, against Kansas City, they actually held all three of those teams under 100 yards rushing. And what's even more interesting about that is they've been playing a lot of 3-3-5, a lot of 3-2-6 defensively. They've put more and more defensive backs on the field. They're trusting guys within that 3-2-6 package in particular. They're trusting guys like Patrick Chung, who's a safety / linebacker for them, to basically play as a linebacker. And so it's been interesting watching the evolution of this defense. Many of us, myself included, were very critical about this defense, obviously coming after the Super Bowl loss, saying, look, you need more athleticism to handle what NFL offenses are doing right now. We saw, air raid plays like the mesh concept, RPO type stuff, just giving them fits last year in the Super Bowl. And so rather than get more athletic linebackers, they're bringing more defensive backs on the field in the form of athletes. So that's going to be something interesting to watch. Do they stay with that sort of nickel and dime package, or do we see more four-man fronts from them in an effort to sort of stop the run? But however they do it, that's going to be their focus. They're going to want to put the ball into Derek Anderson's hand and say, look, if you were going to go out there Monday night and sling it all over the place and come out and beat us, okay, we'll tip our hat to you, but we're not going to let LaShawn McCoy beat us.
No, and that clearly makes sense. I think that the combination, although probably a difference from a long-term view, but in a one-year window, the combination they've put together with LaShawn McCoy, Chris Ivory, even Marcus Murphy is a very solid backfield. I think that, Ivory and McCoy are a great thunder and lightning. You look to a game like that Titans game where, they have the lead. We're looking to try to come back there. They run a final 11-play drive with 9 runs and milk away the clock, drive down the field, kick the game-winning field goal, and that was Chris Ivory and LaShawn McCoy pretty much 100%. One screen pass to Ray McLeod, the other 10 touches were Ivory and McCoy. So in your most critical moment, when most teams would be in a 2-minute drill, 5 wide, no huddle, they were giving it to their 2 best offensive players, which are LaShawn McCoy and Chris Ivory.
Right. And that speaks to why Belichick's going to probably approach it that way. And, that will be the matchup to watch, whether they can, stop the run or if Buffalo's going to be able to get a ground game going on Monday night.
Yeah, and I think that obviously from a Bills fan perspective, everybody's going to be hoping for a competitive approach that way. If they can get a couple things going, I do think that the Patriots have a defense that you can run on. Some of those games, it's tough from a game script standpoint when you get down early. How much of that is because they couldn't run? How much of that is because now you're scrambling and trying to keep up? Obviously, if the Patriots score first, let alone get out in front of everything, it can get out of hand very quickly. I'll ask you for a prediction here in a moment, but I think that the Bills obviously are in a full rebuilding phase. They are probably at a very reasonable approach on defense. I think that they can give the Patriots as much trouble as any team they've played, short of maybe the Jaguars. Being able to have a strong defense with athleticism at the second level that you touched on, a guy like Tre'Davious White that can, relatively take away one of the receivers, some good communicating safeties with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. I think it's something that we can look to expect. Hopefully the defense we saw in that middle stretch, not last week against the Colts, but on offense, it's very tough to expect just about anything. The Bills are pretty much only going to be looking to pull out those 17-13, 14-12, 20-16 kind of games. And I just don't see it's realistic long-term over a full 4 quarters to hold Tom Brady to that kind of score. My prediction, and is probably a touch glimmer of hope, is that they do keep it competitive. The crowd is in there. We get a couple emotional plays from people, a big play early, maybe a strip sack that keeps them in the game. It goes into the second half looking competitive. And then you probably see the Patriots pull away with the score, probably milking it and seeing whether that is Kenyon Barner or James White, just seeing some things milked away at the end. I do see the Patriots probably pulling away, and I'm going to assume we're going to see something maybe 27-10, 27-9. I don't think that the defense after last week is going to come out and let them put up the 40 or 45 that maybe some people would think. I think you'll see some pride from that side of the ball, but I just don't see them being able to hold them back from 3 touchdowns, 2 field goals, something like that, and that eventually that's gonna hold, and they'll bend but don't break for long enough, and eventually probably break.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, I think 13 is the number in this game. It's just pretty big. I mean, divisional games, Monday night game. These are 2 teams that know each other. These are 2 teams that obviously have a history. And these games, for the most part, tend to be close. They tend to be hard fought. We all kind of expect that. I'm going maybe a little bit more optimistic than you from a Bills fans perspective. I'm going 34-20. I think the Patriots will put up some points, but I think the Bills are going to be able to get some points as well against this defense. I think, they'll probably, tack on a big play here or there. There are opportunities to make some big plays in the passing game against this offense. I don't know if it'll be like a full-on scramble drill type situation with Derek Anderson, but mobility from the quarterback position has given the Patriots fits over the past couple of years. It continues into this year, and so if there is an opportunity to sort of extend a play, you might see something like that happen. And so I think it'll be close enough that it's not going to feel like a blowout or anything like that. And it's one of those games where, 2 divisional foes, a couple of breaks go Buffalo's way. Would it surprise me to see this one coming down to the last couple of minutes? No, it wouldn't, because of the history between these 2 teams.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly enjoy the wagering side of things in sports, and this has every recipe that you look for. It has, the night game, where this is obviously a much bigger game for the Bills than it is for the Patriots. It's something where the fans are going to be sauced up all afternoon and in there at full throat, giving Brady everything that they've got. It's probably, I'm going to assume by kickoff, I'm going to guess that it gets over 14, that you're going to see some books at 14.5, just because the Patriots, against the worst offense by some measures in NFL history, that's just going to be too tempting for some people to really pound that number. So I anticipate that's everything you look for from a recipe standpoint of a cover is, still 2 NFL teams, still some, professional level talent, getting 2 touchdowns at home in a game that matters more to that side. All those things try to tell me what the game's supposed to turn out to be. It's just hard for me to see with the struggles they've had. The one glimmer of hope that I have is, I know there was some struggle. Derek Anderson last game, I mean, he played with 3 real practices. He had been on the roster for 8 days. You're now talking about another full week, which you're now talking about 3-4 more legitimate practices, more reps with the receivers, a more legitimate playbook that can be brought into play. Derek Anderson is still a poor quarterback, but he's a veteran quarterback. He understands the game. He can make a throw here or there. He's not going to be the reason you win, but if you put him in a position on a short field, if hopefully we get a healthy LaShawn McCoy, putting him into space with a chance to be able to make a play, I think that there's a chance you could see some of those things. So I won't be foolish to think that an upset is a realistic chance, but that I do hope that there are some paths to a competitive game, and that's in everyone's best interest to have an entertaining game on Monday night. I certainly know the advertisers on ESPN are hoping for that versus 31-0 at halftime or something crazy. So before we get you out of here, let us know anything that you're working on, some work that we can look forward to be able to check out, and anything else we should keep our eyes out for in the future.
Well, again, thanks so much, Greg, for having me on. Really appreciate it. Again, love the work you guys are doing over at Cover1. You guys do such a great job, from Eric on down with the podcast, the breakdowns, and all that stuff. So, just keep up cranking out the great work. As for me, piece I'm going to be working on tomorrow, it's going to be over at Pro Football Weekly, looking at Sam Darnold. Obviously, Pro Football Weekly, they do a lot of stuff on the Bears because they're out of the Chicago area. So I always kind of take a look at their next opponent. So I've got, a look at Sam Darnold, how he's fared so far, what Jeremy Bates is doing with him from a schematic standpoint, with half-field reads and setting stuff up as a play caller. So you can check that out at profootballweekly.com. That will drop at some point Thursday.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. We appreciate everything that you took the time to do with us tonight. Obviously, we're hoping for a competitive game this week, and we'll be certain to touch base again in the future.
Sounds fantastic, Greg. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark. All right, guys, as we wrap up the show for this week, we are going to go through just a couple more things. Obviously, no word yet on LaShawn McCoy. We are still hoping to see him, but he still is formally in the concussion protocol. That is something that I think many fans are anticipating. We may not see him this week. I think that it's critical to have any chance for the game that we do see there. Obviously, the formal announcement was made that Josh Allen is still out. That was not a surprise. Derek Anderson will start, as I touched on with Mark. I think that it's really important that we have a chance to see some more practices in place. As I talked about in the post game after the Colts game, I do think there's a gap between Derek Anderson's veteran savvy understanding. He is still a poor NFL quarterback from overall talent standpoint, but I think there's things he can bring to the field and things that he can bring to the locker room that I don't think Nathan Peterman could do while we're waiting for Josh Allen. Obviously, our number one criteria is to get Allen back out there, see him get those reps, see him understand what he needs to do to develop. But this week, I think our hope is that Derek Anderson can bring some of that veteran savvy understanding to the game plan, that the defense does show up like they did, obviously, early on, against the Vikings, against the Titans, even the defensive effort from the Packers game, and that we can give Derek Anderson, LaShawn McCoy, Kelvin Benjamin a short field, and that we're able to maybe come up with a couple plays and have something that can keep us excited, keep us engaged. From a fan base standpoint, I know a lot of people have understandably low expectations. The Bills are nearly a 2-touchdown underdog at home on Monday Night Football. No one wants to go into this game and see us get embarrassed, see us put up a poor showing in front of the national audience who already has such a low expectation of the team. I want to see the defense bring some pride. I want to see them come forward and really play with the focus and intensity and a great game plan that we saw in some of those previous games where we held some pretty strong offenses to really low output. The Vikings have a great team and put up a lot of points. The Packers surely normally score more than 2 touchdowns. We didn't let the Titans score a single touchdown, and we held the Texans to their lowest offensive production of the season. It's hard to know what last week's performance was. Is that what we should now expect from the Bills defense, that, hey, it's starting to wear down, the lack of an offense and the constant short fields that the defense is being put into? Heck, the high time of possession and the number of snaps they're having to play because the offense can't extend drives and are getting themselves back out there to put the defense in a poor position. I think it's unreasonable to assume that doesn't have some level of impact on the team and on the defense as a whole. we have to hope that with an extra day's rest, with obviously the hyper focus you have of coming in on Monday Night Football with your bitter rivals in town, I do think that we're going to see the best performance we can from this defense. I do think that we're going to see a strong, prideful output from the team. I'm not going to be silly and say that I think that we're going to smack them around and that we're going to all of a sudden come in and pull off an upset here. I do think that that number is high. I think 13 is a lot. I think that the defense can keep this game competitive. It's really going to come down to, do we have LaShawn McCoy? Can Derek Anderson make this a poor but still realistic NFL offense versus the historic depths that they've fallen to over the last bit? So I think that, we're looking for something that's going to have to be dragging it down in the mud, like I like to talk about, being able to pull things into the kind of game the Patriots don't want to have. Really great bubble shell from the defense, keeping plays in front of them, making sound tackles. The Patriots rely on short, quick passing routes to Edelman, to Hogan, to White out of the backfield, being able to get their receivers in a position where they can then break tackles and make plays. Obviously, having a weapon like Gronkowski is going to be a threat. I think there's obviously still some bad blood there with his what I feel was a dirty play against Tre'Davious White, and he obviously got suspended and fined for that. So the NFL agreed. Being able to have that kind of bad blood out there, I'm curious, do the Patriots take a more conservative approach? Do they hold him out, not wanting someone to be retaliatory and try to go after him? Bringing in someone who hasn't had a lot of run, Kenyon Barner is now their fourth different running back getting a lot of run. I think we see a big game from James White. That's going to be a huge performance. It's going to be needed from Tremaine Edmonds and from Matt Milano, that we're going to need to see them really step up with one of their best performances of the season to be able to keep that middle short timing passing game in check, and the communication between Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Matt Milano, and Tremaine Edmonds to manage between the hashes and to be able to control the middle of the field is going to be critical. And if they let Tom Brady manipulate them with his eyes, be able to move them around with pre-snap motion, expose what their coverage is, then I think we could be in for a long night. If we're able to disguise that coverage, if we're able to get pressure on him and be able to really, kind of shake things up and get a lot of pressure out in front of him, then I think that we can keep this competitive. I think we can drag it down in the mud. Maybe we can have an exciting game where we're holding them to a reasonable point total and not allowing them to really pull away and put up the performance that, many in the national media are assuming we're going to see. So again, as we get ready to wrap here, it's been another great week talking about the Bills-Patriots matchup. Take a minute to get over to cover1.net. We've got a lot of fantastic content, a lot of exciting things that are out there. Come and find me on Twitter at Greg Tompsett, GregTompsett. Love to interact with fans, go back and forth, follow back all the Bills fans. Love to be able to talk to some of the Pats fans who came on tonight to listen to Mark and talk to our preview here. So just thanks for everybody and the great interaction and the chat here. Ramon, Rep, Malik, thank you guys for jumping on and being able to be with us tonight. It was a lot of fun. We'll look forward to a great matchup on Monday night. We'll talk to you after that game. Thanks, everybody.